Lieutenant Arya Nakamura stared into the abyss of space, her bloodshot eyes reflecting the countless stars visible through the viewport of Deep Space Monitoring Station Omega-12. The year 2327 marked humanity's furthest permanent outpost, positioned at the very edge of colonized space, well beyond Pluto's eccentric orbit. Her insomnia had worsened during this rotation. 3 months into a 6-month deployment, and sleep had become her most elusive quarry. Another Stim Coffee lieutenant, Ensign Ramon Silva, floated into the monitoring chamber, his movements fluid in the station's low gravity. His perpetual optimism sometimes grated on Arya's nerves, but today she welcomed the distraction. "I've had 4 already. Any more and medical will flag me for substance dependency." She rubbed her temples, trying to massage away the dull throb that had taken residence behind her eyes. Ramon smiled, pushing a steaming bulb toward her anyway. "What they don't know won't hurt them. Besides 12-hour shifts scanning empty space for anomalous signals, anyone would need chemical assistance." Arya accepted the bulb with a grateful nod. 20 outposts spread across the void, and not one has reported anything of interest in 3 years. "Sometimes I wonder why we're even out here." "Because humanity needs to know what's beyond," Ramon said, settling into his station. "And because someone has to listen in case we're not alone." Poetic, Ensign. But after 3 months of silence, I'm starting to think we are. The monitoring chamber hummed with the soft sounds of equipment. The gentle whir of air recyclers, the occasional ping of system diagnostics, and the constant background hiss of cosmic radiation converted to audio. Arya had grown accustomed to these sounds. They had become a lullaby that never quite succeeded in helping her sleep. She turned her attention to her console running the standard sweep protocols. 20 different frequency bands, each scanned in sequence, searching for patterns amid the universe's background noise. It was monotonous work, but necessary. Humanity had spread far across the solar system, establishing colonies on Mars, the Jovian moons, and even the distant reaches of the Kuiper Belt. But they had yet to encounter another intelligent species. Some theorized that advanced civilizations were simply too far apart in space and time to ever meet. Others believed that humanity's evolution, on a high-gravity, radiation-bathed, predator-filled Deathworld, had made them uniquely resilient, perhaps even uniquely dangerous, in a universe of gentler environments. The console emitted a soft chime, drawing Arya from her thoughts. At first, she assumed it was another false positive. Cosmic radiation often created patterns that the computers mistakenly flagged as potentially significant. But as she examined the reading more closely, her exhaustion vanished in an instant. "Ramon," she called, her voice tight with sudden tension. "I've got something." The ensign pushed away from his station, propelling himself across the monitoring chamber to hover at her shoulder. "What is it?" "A pulse pattern. 3 short bursts followed by 2 long ones. Then it repeats." Ramon frowned. "Could be random stellar noise." "That's what I thought at first, but it's mathematically precise, and it's repeating exactly every 17 minutes. Arya enhanced the signal, isolating it from the background noise. "There's no natural phenomenon that creates this kind of pattern." They watched in silence as the pattern repeated once more. 3 short pulses, 2 long ones, then silence for precisely 17 minutes before starting again. "We need to record this," Ramon said finally, his usual breezy demeanor replaced by focused professionalism. "And alert Earth Command immediately." Arya hesitated. "What if it's nothing, just a glitch in our equipment? Then we look like overeager rookies. But if it's something..." Ramon let the thought hang in the air. "If it's something and we ignore it, we've failed at the one job we're out here to do." Arya nodded, coming to a decision. "Start recording all frequency bands. I'll prepare a transmission to Luna HQ." As Arya composed the message, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Humanity had been shouting into the void for centuries, hoping for a response. Now, something in the darkness was signaling back. The message from Deep Space Monitoring Station Omega-12 arrived at Luna headquarters during the middle of the third shift. Most of the administrative staff were either asleep or focused on routine operations. But Admiral Niles Hawthorne, commander of the United Earth Fleet, had learned long ago that the most important messages often came at the most inconvenient times. He reviewed Lieutenant Nakamura's report in his private quarters, a Spartan compartment befitting a career military man. The walls were adorned with only a few mementos: a photograph of Earth taken from Mars, a ceremonial sword presented to him by the Japanese Space Defense Force, and a small painting of the Serengeti, where he had been born. By the time he finished reading, Hawthorne knew that sleep would not come again that night. He reached for his comm unit. "This is Admiral Hawthorne. Convene the Unity Council immediately. Priority Alpha." Within 3 hours, the 12 members of the Unity Council had assembled in the orbital headquarters secure conference chamber. They represented Earth's major political blocs colony, administrators, and military branches. The closest thing humanity had to a unified government in an era of diaspora across the solar system. President Kalin Ortiz, the elected head of the council, looked troubled as Hawthorne presented the findings from Omega-12. A repeating signal. "That's all it could be, anything, Admiral. A pulsar with unusual characteristics. Interference from one of our own distant probes. With respect, Madam President, Lieutenant Nakamura is one of our most experienced monitoring officers. She wouldn't have flagged this if she wasn't certain it warranted attention." Counselor Vance, the representative from the outer colonies, scoffed. "So, we're convened at this ungodly hour because of one lieutenant's hunch." "Not just her hunch," came a voice from the doorway. Dr. Mira Patel, Earth's foremost xenolinguist, entered the chamber carrying a data tablet. Though she had no official position on the council, her expertise had earned her an immediate summons when the signal was reported. "Dr. Patel," President Ortiz acknowledged, "I trust you've analyzed the signal." "I have." The xenolinguist's dark eyes shone with barely contained excitement. "It's not random, and it's definitely not natural. The mathematical precision alone suggests artificial origin, but there's more." She connected her tablet to the room's display system, projecting a visual representation of the pulses. "The pattern doesn't just repeat, it evolves. Subtle variations that initially appear random, but actually form a complex mathematical sequence. And embedded within that sequence," she manipulated the display, highlighting certain segments. "Language, or more accurately, languages, plural." A murmur ran through the council chamber. "What do you mean, languages?" Admiral Hawthorne asked. "The signal contains multiple communication systems, some mathematical, some symbolic. It's as if whoever sent it was trying every possible way to be understood." Dr. Patel's voice quickened with excitement. "And one segment contains repeating phonetic structures that correspond to verbal communication." "Can you translate it?" President Ortiz leaned forward. "Not completely, not yet. But the core message is unmistakable across all the variants." Dr. Patel locked eyes with the president. "It's an SOS, a distress call." Silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. "Who sent it?" Counselor Vance finally asked, his earlier skepticism muted. "Based on the embedded cultural markers, I believe it originates from a species calling themselves the Ahrada," Dr. Patel replied. "The message references a Drax Imperium as the source of their distress. So we've received an alien distress call from one species being attacked by another." Admiral Hawthorne's voice was measured, but his mind was already calculating response options, ship deployments, tactical scenarios. "The question now," President Ortiz said, "is what do we do about it?" The debate raged for hours. The Unity Council, for all its lofty ideals of human cooperation, remained deeply divided on how to respond to humanity's first confirmed contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. "Our resources are already stretched thin," argued Counselor Vance, leading the isolationist faction. "We have colony worlds struggling with resource shortages, infrastructural challenges on Mars, and security concerns in the Jupiter sector. We cannot afford to divert ships' personnel and resources to an alien conflict that may not even be real." May not be real. Dr. Patel's voice rose in indignation. The mathematical precision of this signal. Mathematics doesn't tell us their intentions, Vance cut in. This could be a trap. A lure to draw us out, expose our capabilities, make us vulnerable. President Ortiz, who had been listening intently to both sides, finally spoke. If we ignore this call for help, what does that say about us as a species? We've overcome tremendous challenges to reach the stars. We've survived on what you yourself often call our death world, Counselor Vance. That struggle has given us strength, resilience. All the more reason to focus on our own survival, Vance countered. No. Ortiz shook her head. All the more reason to extend a hand to those who may not have developed the same resilience. If we turn our backs on this plea, we become the very predators our ancestors feared might exist among the stars. Admiral Hawthorne cleared his throat. If I may, Madam President, I've taken the liberty of preparing a preliminary response plan. A task force, what I'm calling Fleet Doom, consisting of 30 warships, 4 carriers, and the dreadnought Leviathan, plus 20,000 Deathworld Marines for potential ground operations. 20,000 lives, Counselor Vance's face reddened. You're proposing to risk 20,000 human lives for aliens we've never even seen. Volunteers only, Hawthorne clarified. And based on preliminary soundings among the officer corps, we'll have no shortage of those. President Ortiz surveyed the room. I believe we've all had sufficient time to consider our positions. The matter before the Unity Council is clear. Do we respond to this distress call, or do we not? I call for a vote. In the end, the vote was 8-4 in favor of intervention. Not the overwhelming mandate Hawthorne had hoped for, but enough to proceed. As the council members filed out, President Ortiz approached the Admiral. Your Fleet Doom, she said quietly. Why that name? Hawthorne's weathered face creased in a grim smile. Because we're what evolved from a death world. We're what nightmares fear. And we're bringing doom to whoever thought it was acceptable to prey on those calling for help. Preparation for humanity's first interstellar rescue mission moved with breathtaking speed. The ships of Fleet Doom, assembled in high Earth, orbit their sleek forms, designed for both atmospheric operations and the void of space. The Leviathan, a dreadnought, measuring over 3 kilometers from bow to stern, served as the fleet's command vessel and the symbol of humanity's resolve. Inside the Leviathan's cavernous hangar bay, Major Lena Ortiz, no relation to the president despite sharing a surname, supervised the loading of Deathworld Marine combat exosuits. The bulky, armored frames would allow humans to fight effectively in varied gravity conditions, protect against radiation and environmental hazards, and amplify their already considerable strength. A legacy of evolving on a high-gravity world. Final systems check on Alpha Company's suits, she ordered her lieutenant. I want 0 malfunctions when we deploy. Yes, Major. The lieutenant hesitated. Permission to speak freely. Ortiz nodded, not looking up from her inventory tablet. The men are asking, what are we going to find out there? What do these Ahrata look like? Are they compatible with our life support systems if we need to evacuate them? Ortiz finally looked up. Dr. Patel's linguistic team has extracted some cultural and biological markers from the SOS. The Ahrata appear to be oxygen breathers carbon-based with similar environmental requirements to our own. Beyond that, she shrugged. We'll adapt. That's what humans do. Meanwhile, in the Leviathan's bridge, Admiral Hawthorne reviewed the final preparations with his command staff. Hawking Drive, spooled to maximum capacity, reported his XO Captain Judith Waters. All ships report ready for translation. The Hawking Drive was humanity's greatest technological achievement, a propulsion system that created controlled space-time distortions, allowing ships to effectively slide between distant points, faster than light could travel through normal space. It had revolutionized travel within the solar system, but had never been used for the distances they now contemplated. Transit time to the signal's origin, Hawthorne asked. Approximately 72 hours, sir. 3 consecutive jumps with recalibration periods between each. Hawthorne nodded. Very well. Status of the Nova Cascade. An uncomfortable silence fell over the bridge. Captain Waters exchanged glances with the weapons officer before responding. The Nova Cascade protocol is operational, Admiral. But I must remind you that it remains experimental. Simulations suggest a 60% chance of unintended cascading reactions if deployed. Noted, Captain. But if we're facing a species capable of driving the errata to broadcast a galactic distress call, we may need every advantage. Hawthorne addressed the entire bridge crew. This mission represents humanity's first step beyond our solar system. We go not as conquerors, but as respondents to a call for help. Nevertheless, we will be prepared for resistance. The safety of this fleet and its personnel remains my primary concern. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. All vessels, this is Admiral Hawthorne. Prepare for Hawking translation on my mark. 3, 2, 1, translate. Across the fleet, massive energies surged through the Hawking drives. Space itself seemed to ripple like the surface of a pond, blue-tinged distortion fields enveloping each ship. Then, in a flash of cerulean light, Fleet Doom vanished from Earth orbit, leaving only the fading ripples of disturbed spacetime. The journey pushed human technology to its limits. Each translation through the Hawking effect subjected the ships and their crews to enormous strain. Reality itself seemed to twist and compress during the jumps, causing many personnel to experience temporal disorientation and vivid hallucinations. Medical teams worked continuously to treat the physical and psychological effects of what the crew had begun calling Hawking sickness. By the third and final jump, even the most experienced space travelers were feeling the effects. On the Leviathan's bridge, Admiral Hawthorne gripped his command chair as the blue-tinged distortion enveloped the view screens. Final translation commencing, announced the navigation officer, her voice strained. Emergence in the errata system in 3, 2, 1. The universe snapped back into focus with a disorienting lurch. Alarms immediately blared across the bridge as sensor officers called out reports. Multiple vessels detected in high-orbit energy signatures consistent with weapons discharge. Planetary surface shows widespread thermal anomalies, consistent with bombardment or large-scale fires. Receiving transmissions on multiple frequencies, chaotic distress calls, tactical communications. Hawthorne stood ignoring the lingering nausea from the translation. Tactical display now. The main view screen shifted to show a strategic overview. A blue-green world, presumably the errata homeworld, dominated the center. Around it, dozens of vessels engaged in what could only be described as a one-sided slaughter. Smaller ships, presumably errata defense vessels, were being systematically destroyed by larger predatory-looking craft with distinctive barbed silhouettes. The larger vessels match cultural markers from the SOS, reported the sensor officer. They're Drax ships. How many? Hawthorne asked, mentally calculating their odds. 117 vessels of various classes, including that. The officer highlighted a massive ship nearly twice the size of the Leviathan. Its hull bristled with weapon emplacements, and an ominous aperture on its forward section glowed with barely contained energy. Some kind of superweapon, Captain Waters asked. Based on energy readings, it appears capable of focused, stellar mass compression, the weapons officer replied. A planet cracker. Hawthorne's expression hardened. Order the fleet to combat Formation Delta. Carriers to launch fighter screens. Open a channel to the Drax flagship. Channel open, sir. Hawthorne squared his shoulders. This is Admiral Niles Hawthorne of the United Earth Fleet. We are responding to a distress call from the errata people. Cease your attack immediately and withdraw from this system, or we will take action to defend the errata. For a long moment, there was no response. Then, the communications officer reported, receiving visual transmission from the Drax flagship. On screen, Hawthorne ordered. The view screen flickered, then revealed what appeared to be the Drax command center. The aliens were vaguely reptilian with elongated skulls, vertical slit pupils, and scales in mottled patterns of dark green and black. The central figure, adorned with elaborate armor, leaned toward the camera with a gesture that somehow conveyed contempt, despite its alien features. Earth Vessel, the translator, interpreted the harsh, clicking speech. "Your presence is unexpected but irrelevant. The Arata are our prey. Their weakness makes them unworthy of existence. Leave now and you may continue your own insignificant lives. Interfere and you join the Arata in extinction." The transmission cut off before Hawthorne could respond. "Well," he said quietly, "I believe that clarifies their position." "Sir," Captain Waters said, "they're redeploying to face us. Weapon systems coming online." "So be it." Hawthorne's voice carried across the bridge with calm authority. "All ships weapons free. Engage the enemy. Captain Vega, launch your fighters. Major Ortiz, prepare boarding teams. Today we teach the Drax that when you hunt the defenseless, sometimes you attract the attention of something far more dangerous." Captain Idris Vega had never imagined his first engagement beyond Earth's solar system would be against an alien armada. As commander of the Leviathan's fighter wing, he now led 300 aerospace combat vehicles into the furious melee above the Arata homeworld. "Raptor Squadron, focus on their escort craft," he ordered through the tactical network. "Eagle Squadron targeting runs on the cruiser-class vessels. Phoenix Squadron with me. We're going to give that flagship something to think about besides the planet." His fighter, a sleek, predatory shape designed for both space and atmospheric combat, accelerated as he pushed the throttle forward. The Drax vessels were already reacting to the human fighters, their own smaller craft moving to intercept, while the larger ships maintained bombardment patterns against the Arata world. "Their fighters are faster than simulations predicted," reported his wingman, as they dodged streams of energy weapons. "But their targeting solutions seem basic, predictive, rather than adaptive." Vega banked hard, using his fighters' superior maneuverability to slip past the first wave of Drax interceptors. "They've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of." Indeed, the Drax tactics seem to assume conventional, predictable responses. The human fighters, piloted by men and women who had trained in the crushing gravity well of Earth, executed maneuvers that would have killed pilots from lower gravity worlds. The neural interfaces connecting pilots to their craft allowed for reactions at machine speed, turning the fighters into extensions of human will. "Phoenix 3, on your 6, Vega called, watching, as one of his squadron members acquired a Drax fighter on their tail. "I see him," came the terse reply. The human fighter suddenly cut thrust, allowing the Drax to overshoot, then executed a flip maneuver that would have caused a blackout in an unaugmented human. The fighter's weapons flared, and the pursuing Drax craft erupted into fragments. But for every Drax vessel destroyed, the sheer numbers of the alien fleet began to tell. Human fighters started taking hits, their pilots ejecting into the void, where rescue drones would hopefully retrieve them. The larger human warships pushed forward into the Drax formation, exchanging devastating broadsides that lit up the space around the planet. Meanwhile, aboard the Leviathan Major, Lena Ortiz led her Deathworld Marines into the deployment bay. Each soldier was sealed within an exosuit, the mechanical frames amplifying their strength and providing protection against both weapons fire and the harsh conditions of space. The suit's programming adapted to each Marine's neural patterns, allowing them to move as naturally as if the powered armor were their own skin. "Listen up," Ortiz's voice carried through the Marine's comm system. "Stealth shuttles will deliver us to the Drax vessels. Priority targets are their command centers and weapons control. Secondary objectives include data retrieval and prisoner capture if possible." A young lieutenant raised his hand. "And the Arata, ma'am, are we conducting rescue operations?" "Affirmative. Third wave shuttles will head planetside to establish secure zones for civilian evacuation. But make no mistake, this is a combat drop first. The Drax have shown no interest in diplomacy." The deployment bay doors opened, revealing the chaos of the space battle beyond. Ortiz felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as her shuttle's engines powered up. For Earth, for humanity, and for those who called for help, she said more to herself than her troops. Deathworlders deploy. The stealth shuttles launched from the Leviathan's bays, their advanced cloaking technology making them nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. Navigating through the firefight required all the pilot's skill, but they had trained for this, running countless simulations based on the limited data available about Drax vessel configurations. Ortiz's shuttle approached one of the larger Drax cruisers, its barbed hull bristling with weapon emplacements. The pilot located an external airlock, a universal necessity on spacecraft, regardless of the species that built them, and executed a precision docking maneuver. "Breach team, you're up," Ortiz ordered. Two Marines moved forward, attaching a circular device to the airlock's exterior door. The device hummed briefly, then projected a focused energy field that disrupted the molecular bonds in the door's material. A perfect circle simply ceased to exist, leaving a Marine-sized hole. Breached. Atmosphere venting but holding in adjacent compartments. "Move in," Ortiz commanded. "Weapons hot, but remember, we need intelligence as much as we need kills." The Marines entered the Drax vessel, their exosuits automatically adjusting to the alien environment. The gravity was lighter than Earth standard, giving the humans an additional advantage. Their enhanced strength, already formidable, became even more pronounced in the reduced gravitational field. They encountered resistance almost immediately. Drax security forces, armed with energy weapons that fired beams of superheated plasma, took positions at the end of a long corridor. Cover, Ortiz called diving, behind a structural support, as plasma fire seared the space where she had stood. The Marines responded with disciplined bursts from their own Gauss rifles, the hypervelocity projectiles finding gaps in the Drax armor. "Their armor's weak at the joint sections," observed Sergeant Diaz, as his shots dropped two Drax warriors. "Prioritize those targets." The Marines pushed forward their Earth-evolved reflexes and augmented strength, giving them a decisive edge in close quarters. But the Drax fought with desperate ferocity, and for every corridor cleared, another group of defenders appeared. "They're falling back toward the command center," Ortiz noted, consulting the schematic generated by her suit's sensors. "Good. That's where we want to go anyway." As the boarding actions unfolded across multiple Drax vessels, the space battle reached a critical phase. The human fleet, despite superior tactics and technology, was gradually being surrounded by the more numerous Drax forces. Fighter squadrons reported dwindling numbers, and several human warships had suffered critical damage. On the Leviathan's bridge, Admiral Hawthorne received increasingly dire reports. "Admiral, we've lost the destroyers." Theseus and Atreus, Captain Waters, reported grimly. "The carrier Olympus is reporting critical reactor containment issues. And the Drax flagship, their planet cracker, is moving into final firing position." Hawthorne studied the tactical display. The massive Drax vessel, identified in their communications as the Titan's Maw, had indeed begun a ponderous turn, bringing its primary weapon to bear on the Arata homeworld. "Time to planetary weapon discharge," he asked. 15 minutes based on their power buildup." Hawthorne closed his eyes briefly, weighing his options. When he opened them, his decision was made. "Initiate Nova Cascade Protocol. Target the main concentration of Drax warships." A hush fell over the bridge. Captain Waters stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Sir, the Cascade is untested in actual combat. The potential for uncontrolled reaction is a risk we must take," Hawthorne finished for her. "If that planet cracker fires millions of Arata die, I won't let that happen on my watch." Waters nodded, turning to the weapons officer. "Initialize Nova Cascade targeting sequence. Authentication Waters Alpha 70. "Authentication confirmed," the weapons officer replied, his fingers moving across his console. "Nova Cascade Protocol initiated. Targeting solution acquired. Awaiting final authorization." Hawthorne placed his hand on the biometric scanner beside his command chair. "Authorization Hawthorne Omega Final. Execute Nova Cascade." From the Leviathan's specialized launcher, A small, unassuming projectile emerged. It accelerated toward the densest concentration of Drax vessels, appearing no more threatening than a standard missile. "Cascade projectile away," reported the weapons officer. "Impact in 30 seconds." The Drax vessels, apparently detecting the incoming threat, attempted evasive maneuvers. But they had no way of knowing what they faced. No way to understand the terrible weapon humanity had brought to their first interstellar conflict. "Cascade impact in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, impact." For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, at the precise point where the projectile struck a Drax cruiser space, itself appeared to fold inward. A sphere of absolute darkness appeared, growing rapidly as it consumed matter energy and even light itself. Drax vessels caught in its expanding radius simply vanished, erased from existence, as the fundamental forces holding their atomic structures together collapsed. "Cascade effect stable." The weapons officer reported, his voice tight with tension. "Containment field holding." The sphere continued to grow for precisely 12 seconds, then began to contract just as rapidly. As it collapsed back to a singularity, a blinding flash erupted at its center. The released energy of everything it had consumed converted to pure radiation. When the sensors cleared, a perfect sphere of empty space remained where 40 Drax vessels had been moments before. No debris, no radiation, no trace they had ever existed. "Nova Cascade successful," Captain Waters said quietly. "Estimated 43 enemy vessels neutralized." The remaining Drax ships paused in their attack, clearly shaken by the demonstration of power they had just witnessed. But the Titan's maw continued its ponderous turn, the glow from its primary weapon intensifying. "They're not stopping," Hawthorne realized. "They're accelerating their attack plan." Indeed, new readings indicated the Planet Cracker was building power more rapidly, its weapon now potentially minutes from firing. The massive ship had been outside the Nova Cascade's radius, protected by the bulk of its fleet. A fleet that no longer existed. "We can't fire another Cascade so soon," the weapons officer warned. "The drive needs time to recharge." Hawthorne's mind raced through options, each less viable than the last. Then, his communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission, not from the Drax, but from within his own fleet. "Sir," came Major Ortiz's voice, crackling with interference. "We've boarded the Drax cruiser Inevitable Dominance. Their databases contain technical specifications for the Titan's maw. We can take it out from the inside." "Explain," Hawthorne demanded. "A small team, 5 of my best. Stealth insertion through their secondary maintenance airlocks. Their security is focused outward. They never expected internal threats. We can reach their power core and initiate an overload." "It's a suicide mission," Hawthorne said flatly. There was a brief pause before Ortiz replied. "With respect, sir, we volunteered for this mission knowing it might be one way. If the maw fires, an entire civilization dies. We can't let that happen." Hawthorne closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command more heavily than ever before. "You have your authorization, Major. Godspeed." "Thank you, sir." Ortiz out. The stealth shuttle detached from the disabled Drax cruiser, its cloaking system engaged to maximum capacity. The 5 Marines inside, Major Ortiz, Sergeant Diaz, and 3 veteran operators, had removed the bulkier components of their exosuits, sacrificing protection for mobility and stealth. "The maw's power core is here," Ortiz indicated on the schematic displayed on the shuttle's screen. "Based on the data we captured, their containment systems are similar to our fusion reactors, but with significantly less redundancy. They never anticipated sabotage. Their arrogance will be their downfall," Sergeant Diaz remarked, checking his sidearm. The shuttle approached the massive Drax flagship, dwarfed by its enormous bulk. The Planet Cracker weapon dominated the forward section, a terrible maw indeed, glowing with the energy it was gathering to unleash on the errata world below. "There," the pilot pointed. "Secondary maintenance airlock, just as the schematics showed." The shuttle executed a perfect, silent docking maneuver, attaching to the Titan's maw, like a remora on a shark. The same breaching technique they had used on the cruiser created an entrance, and the 5 Marines slipped aboard. The interior of the flagship was vast, with corridors tall enough to accommodate the Drax's larger forms. The team moved silently, using the schematics to navigate toward the power core. Twice they were forced to hide as Drax security patrols passed, but the aliens were clearly focused on the external battle, not internal threats. "Motion sensors ahead," whispered Lieutenant Park, the team's tech specialist. "Disabling now." He attached a small device to a wall panel, which sent a precisely calibrated pulse through the ship's security network. The lights on the motion sensors winked out. "Clear for 60 seconds, he reported. "Move." They sprinted down the corridor, reaching a massive door that separated them from the power core chamber. Unlike the maintenance airlock, this would not yield to their breaching charges. "How do we get through?" Diaz asked. Ortiz studied the control panel beside the door. "The Drax use a bioelectric authentication system. We need one of them." As if summoned by her words, a Drax technician rounded the corner. The alien froze upon seeing the humans, its hand moving toward an alarm panel on the wall. Diaz reacted with inhuman speed, crossing the distance in 2 bounds, and tackling the technician before it could raise the alarm. There was a brief, silent struggle. Then Diaz rose the unconscious technician, slung over his shoulder. "Will this do?" Ortiz nodded. "Lieutenant Park." The tech specialist examined the control panel, then carefully lifted the technician's 3-fingered hand and pressed it against the scanner. The door hummed, then slowly slid open. "In quick," Ortiz ordered. The power core of the Titan's Maw was a marvel of alien engineering, a pulsating sphere of contained energy surrounded by a complex web of conduits and control stations. Drax technicians monitored the systems, their backs to the door, as they focused on maintaining the tremendous energy flow to the planet cracker weapon. "We need a diversion," Ortiz whispered. Lieutenant Park nodded, removing a small device from his gear. "Electromagnetic pulse localized. Won't damage the core itself, but should knock out their monitoring systems temporarily." "Do it." Park activated the device and slid it across the floor toward the main control console. A moment later, there was a soft pop, followed by sparks erupting from several stations. The Drax technicians scrambled in confusion, barking orders at each other in their harsh, clicking language. Now, Ortiz led the charge into the room. The surprise was complete. Before the technicians could react, the Marines had secured the chamber, herding the confused aliens to one side with weapons trained on them. "Lieutenant, the core controls." Park moved to the main console, studying the alien interface. "The architecture is strange, but the principles are universal. I can induce a cascade failure in their containment field, but it'll take a few minutes to bypass their security protocols." "Do it fast," Ortiz said, eyeing the door. "They'll have detected our presence by now." As if to confirm her words, alarms began to sound throughout the vessel. Red lighting pulsed along the corridors, and harsh announcements echoed in the Drax language. "They know we're here," Diaz said grimly, taking position by the door. "And they know what we're trying to do." Over the comm system, a human voice broke through. "Admiral Hawthorne from the Leviathan. Major Ortiz status report. The Maw's weapon is reaching critical power levels." "We're in the core chamber, sir," Ortiz replied. "Working to initiate overload. How long do we have?" "Less than 5 minutes before they can fire on the planet." Ortiz looked to Park, who was working feverishly at the alien console. "Lieutenant." "Almost there," he muttered. "Their security is adaptive but not as sophisticated as ours. Just a few more. They're—" The pulsating energy sphere at the center of the chamber suddenly changed color, shifting from a steady blue to a fluctuating purple. The captured Drax technicians began clicking and hissing in what was clearly alarm. "Core destabilization initiated," Park announced. "Containment field weakening. Estimated time to critical failure, 8 minutes. "Too long," Ortiz said. "The planet cracker will fire in 5. Park's expression was grim, but determined. "I can accelerate the process, but I'll need direct access to the containment field generators." He pointed to a series of massive cylinders ringing the energy sphere. Those controls are physically isolated from the network for safety. Can you reach them? Yes, but I won't be able to get back. Park's voice was calm. The radiation exposure, once I begin tampering with them, will be lethal. Ortiz gripped his shoulder. Lieutenant, with respect, Major, we all knew this might be one way. Let me do my job. Before she could respond, the door to the core chamber buckled under heavy impact. They're coming through, Diaz called, taking cover position. Major Ortiz. Admiral Hawthorne's voice came through again. The Maw is in final firing position. Whatever you're going to do, do it now. Ortiz made her decision. Lieutenant Park, proceed with core destabilization. Sergeant Diaz, hold that door as long as you can. The rest of you with me? We need to find an escape route. Park nodded. Once then, moved toward the containment field generators, tools in hand. Diaz and the other Marines took defensive positions around the chamber entrance. Admiral, Ortiz said into her comm, one of our team is accelerating the core overload. Request immediate extraction for remaining personnel if possible. Understood, Major. We're dispatching a rescue shuttle to your transmitted coordinates. But you need to hurry. The Maw's weapon is powering to discharge. The door to the chamber finally gave way, and Drax's security forces poured through. The Marines opened fire, their superior reflexes and combat training momentarily stemming the tide. But there were too many. Go, Major, Diaz shouted. We'll hold them here. Ortiz hesitated for only a second before nodding. Sergeant, it's been an honor. Likewise, ma'am. Now move. Ortiz and one remaining Marine, Corporal Jimenez, retreated through a secondary access door, sealing it behind them. They ran through the labyrinthine corridors of the massive ship, following the escape route they had planned, using the captured schematics. Behind them, Lieutenant Park reached the containment field generators and began his work. His hands moved with precision despite the increasing radiation levels that were already causing his skin to blister. One by one, he disabled the safety interlocks designed to prevent exactly what he was attempting to do. In the chamber entrance, Sergeant Diaz and the remaining Marine fought a desperate holding action against the Drax security forces. The aliens pressed forward relentlessly, uncaring of their losses, determined to stop the sabotage of their flagship. Aboard the Leviathan, Admiral Hawthorne watched the tactical display with growing tension. The Titan's Maw's primary weapon had reached full power, its targeting systems locked on the Arata homeworld. 30 seconds to weapon discharge, reported the sensor officer. Any word from the extraction team? Hawthorne asked. Captain Waters shook her head. The rescue shuttle is approaching the Maw now, but reports heavy defensive fire. Hawthorne's knuckles whitened as he gripped his command chair. All ships concentrate fire on the Maw's forward section. Try to disrupt their targeting systems. The remaining human vessels redirected their attacks, pouring fire into the Drax flagship. But the massive ship shrugged off the assault, its formidable shields holding. 20 seconds to discharge. Inside the Titan's Maw, Lieutenant Park completed his sabotage of the containment field generators. The energy sphere at the center of the chamber was now a violent, swirling maelstrom of destabilized power, straining against its weakened containment. Core critical, he reported calmly into his comm, even as radiation burns spread across his body. Containment failure in 15 seconds. At the chamber entrance, Sergeant Diaz's position was finally overrun. The Drax warriors surged forward, only to halt in confusion as they saw the destabilizing core. Their officers barked frantic orders initiating emergency shutdown protocols. But it was too late. Major Ortiz and Corporal Jimenez reached an external maintenance hatch just as the rescue shuttle arrived, dodging defensive fire to position itself for extraction. Major Ortiz to rescue shuttle, we are at extraction point, she called. 2 for pickup. Acknowledged, Major. Stand by for pressure seal. As the shuttle connected to the hatch, a violent tremor ran through the Titan's Maw. On its bridge, Drax commanders watched in horror as power readings from the core spiked beyond all safety parameters. 10 seconds to weapon discharge, reported the Leviathan sensor officer. Then, at the heart of the Drax flagship, The containment field finally collapsed. The destabilized energy core released its power all at once, a catastrophic chain reaction that tore through the massive vessel from the inside out. The Titan's maw seemed to bulge for an instant, then erupted in a blinding explosion that momentarily outshone the system's star. The planet cracker weapon moments from firing dissolved in the cataclysm, its terrible purpose unfulfilled. Multiple secondary explosions detected, reported the Leviathan's sensor officer, her voice rising with elation. "The maw is breaking up!" Indeed, the massive flagship was coming apart, great sections of its hull peeling away as internal explosions continued to rip through its structure. The rescue shuttle carrying Major Ortiz and Corporal Jimenez accelerated away from the dying behemoth, weaving through debris fields as it returned to the Leviathan. The effect on the remaining Drax fleet was immediate and profound. With their flagship destroyed and over a third of their vessels erased by the Nova Cascade, the aliens' coordinated attack faltered. Individual captains began breaking formation, some continuing to fight, while others turned their ships away from the Arata world. Admiral Hawthorne saw the opportunity and seized it. All vessels press the advantage. Carriers launch all remaining fighters. Target their command ships specifically. The reinvigorated human fleet surged forward, coordinated attacks, picking apart the increasingly disorganized Drax formations. Captain Vega led his remaining fighters in precision strikes against the aliens' communication arrays, further disrupting their ability to coordinate. Within an hour, the Drax retreat had become a rout. The remaining alien vessels fled the system, jumping to faster-than-light travel in small, disorganized groups. "They're running," Captain Waters said, disbelief and triumph mingling in her voice. "Let them," Hawthorne replied. "Let them carry word of what happened here. Let them tell others what happens when you attack the defenseless, while the Deathworlders are watching." He turned to his communications officer. "Establish contact with the Arata. Tell them the threat has been neutralized. And prepare landing craft. They're going to need help down there." The aftermath of the battle brought humanity face to face with the Arata. The alien species proved to be slender, graceful beings, with iridescent skin in shades of blue and purple. Their large, multifaceted eyes regarded the human rescuers with what appeared to be wonder and gratitude. Landers from the human fleet touched down in relatively undamaged areas of the Arata capital, disgorging engineering teams, medical personnel, and security forces. The Deathworld Marines, still in their imposing exosuits, secured perimeters, while human engineers worked alongside Arata technicians to restore power and life support to damaged habitats. Major Ortiz, one of the few officers who had seen direct ground combat during the operation, led a detachment providing security at the main relief coordination center. The Arata facility, once a cultural institute dedicated to artistic pursuits, now served as the nerve center for the reconstruction efforts. "Their architecture is incredible," she remarked to Admiral Hawthorne, who had come planetside to oversee operations personally. "Everything designed to amplify beauty rather than function." "A luxury of evolution on a benign world," Hawthorne replied, watching as Arata and humans worked side by side. No predators, few natural disasters, abundant resources. They developed art and philosophy while our ancestors were still fighting to survive every day. And now we're using what that struggle taught us to protect them. Hawthorne nodded. "Ironic, isn't it? Our Deathworld prepared us for exactly this moment." An Arata approached them, taller than most of its kind, wearing elaborate garments that seemed to flow like liquid around its slender form. The human's translation devices identified it as Lord Seelan, one of the few surviving members of the Arata ruling council. Admiral Hawthorne, the translation, rendered the Arata's musical speech. "The Provisional Council requests your presence. Our leader wishes to speak with you." Hawthorne inclined his head. "Of course, Lord Seelan. Major Ortiz will accompany me." They followed the Arata through corridors of breathtaking beauty, even with the damage from the Drax attack, visible in cracked crystal walls and toppled sculptures. The council chamber itself was a dome of translucent material that filtered the planet's sunlight into complex patterns across the floor. The Errata leader, introduced as High Guardian Thelion, awaited them. The alien skin held deeper hues than most of its kind, with patterns that the translation device indicated denoted great age and wisdom. Admiral Hawthorne of Earth. Thelion's translated voice was rich with emotion. Words cannot express what your people have done for mine. When we sent our call into the void, we had no hope of rescue. The Drax had destroyed our defenses, our orbital stations. We faced extinction. We responded as any decent species would, Hawthorne said simply. No, Thelion gestured with elegantly elongated fingers. Many would not. Many did not. Our call reached dozens of worlds with spacefaring capability. You alone came. The alien leader moved closer, its faceted eyes studying the humans intently. Your physicians have shared information about your world with our scientists. We now understand that you evolved on what our classification system would term a death world, a planet that should by all logic have prevented the rise of sapient life through its dangers. Earth shaped us, Hawthorne acknowledged, made us resilient, determined, made you capable of imagining our suffering and acting to end it, Thelion corrected. From harsh beginnings came great compassion. This is a profound revelation to my people. The Errata leader made a ritual gesture, and assistants brought forward an ornate crystal device. We propose an alliance between our peoples, the sharing of knowledge, culture, and protection. You have the strength we lack. We have insights your world's challenges may have prevented you from discovering. Hawthorne glanced at Ortiz, who nodded slightly. I am authorized by Earth's Unity Council to negotiate exactly such an arrangement, he said. Though the final pact will require ratification. Of course, Thelion agreed. But let us begin with this. The alien touched the crystal device, which projected a three-dimensional star map between them. Our stellar cartography covering regions unknown to your people, including a section of the map enlarged highlighting particular systems, all known Drax territories. Hawthorne studied the map with keen interest. This will be invaluable for defensive planning. And for more, Thelion added. Our call for help was heard by many, answered by one. But now others throughout this sector know of the Deathworlders who came to our aid. Already we received transmissions from worlds that had withdrawn into isolation for fear of the Drax. They wished to establish contact with Earth. A coalition, Ortiz suggested. Perhaps in time, Thelion's gesture conveyed cautious optimism. For now, know that your actions here have rekindled hope across many worlds. The story spreads. When all seemed lost, the humans answered. In the days that followed, the formal alliance between Earth and the Errata was established. President Ortiz, having traveled from Luna aboard a high-speed diplomatic vessel, signed the Pact of Unity with Lord Selin, representing the Errata Provisional Government. The ceremony broadcast throughout human-controlled space and to the handful of Errata colonies that had escaped the Drax attacks, marked humanity's first official interstellar alliance. Most of the fleet Doom vessels prepared to return to Earth, carrying news of their victory and the samples of Errata technology that formed the first exchange under the new pact. But the Leviathan would remain a guardian presence, ensuring that the Drax would think twice before returning to this system. Admiral Hawthorne stood on the observation deck of the massive dreadnought, gazing down at the Errata homeworld. The planet's twin moons were rising over the horizon, casting silver light across the azure oceans. Beautiful, isn't it? Major Ortiz joined him at the viewport. Her arm was still in a healing cast, a souvenir of the desperate escape from the Titan's maw, but her eyes were clear and focused. Worth protecting, Hawthorne agreed. The Unity Council's already approved expansion of the fleet program, Ortiz informed him, calling it the Guardian Initiative. More ships, more Marines. They're talking about building installations at key points between our system and Errata space. Hawthorne nodded, unsurprised. We've opened the door to the stars, Major. No going back now. Would you want to? The Admiral considered the question. No, he said finally. For all the loss we've suffered, for all the challenges ahead. No. Humanity needed this. Needed to be reminded that our strength has purpose beyond mere survival. On the planet below, reconstruction was well underway. Human engineering teams worked alongside Arata artisans, merging practical solutions with aesthetic beauty in ways neither would have conceived alone. And in the great crystal dome that had once housed the Arata's artistic treasures, a new monument was being constructed, a memorial to those who had fallen in the battle above. At its center stood a simple holographic display, cycling through the names and images of the human and Arata dead. Lieutenant Park Sergeant Diaz and thousands of others who had given their lives would be remembered here on a world they had never seen before its moment of greatest need. In the vacuum of space beyond the Leviathan, automated probes were already being deployed, early warning systems that would alert both Earth and the Arata should the Drax return in force. But Admiral Hawthorne suspected they would not soon at least. The Drax had learned an expensive lesson about the consequences of treating other species as mere prey. Word was spreading among the stars. The Deathworlders had come. The Predators had fled. And those who sent calls for help into the darkness now had reason to hope for an answer. Lieutenant Aria Nakamura stood her watch at monitoring station Omega 12, just as she had months before when the first signal was detected. But much had changed since then. The station now housed an enhanced detection array, a gift from the Arata capable of picking up transmissions from far greater distances than human technology alone could manage. Ensign Ramon Silva floated into the chamber, bringing her the customary stim coffee. "Anything interesting today, Lieutenant?" Aria smiled, accepting the bulb. Her chronic insomnia had finally begun to improve. Something about knowing they weren't alone in the universe, and that humanity's unique strengths had purpose, had eased a tension she hadn't realized she carried. "Nothing urgent," she replied. "But there's a lot more chatter out there than there used to be. Worlds talking to worlds. None of them directed at us specifically, but they know we're listening now." Ramon settled into his station. "Think we'll get another SOS?" "Eventually. The galaxy's a dangerous place." Aria took a sip of her coffee, watching the stars through the viewport. "But I think when the call comes, we'll have more friends to help us answer it." "The Arata ambassador was speaking about that on the newsfeed yesterday," Ramon said. "Called it the Deathworlder effect. The idea that species from harsh worlds might be uniquely suited to protecting those from gentler environments." "Guardians forged in fire," Aria mused. "I like that." She returned her attention to her console, monitoring the whispers of distant civilizations with renewed purpose. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger community, guided not by conquest or exploitation, but by the simple decision to answer a call for help. And somewhere out in the vastness of space, others were telling the story. The Deathworlders had received an SOS and sent Fleet Doom, not to conquer, but to save. Not to destroy, but to preserve. The Predators of the galaxy now had reason to look over their shoulders and wonder if they hunt the defenseless, who might answer when their prey calls out into the void.